G'day, everybody. Two Ordinary Cops are back again. Schultzy, how are you, mate?
Mate, I am excellent. Just kicking along down here in Brisbane, mate. I did a nice slow cooked chuck roast yesterday, so I was pretty chuffed with myself. It took I started at 3 in the morning and it finished at about 5:30 in the afternoon. So yeah, mate, it was definitely delicious. That's for sure.
Very keen, mate. Very keen. What's going on in podcast land?
Well, mate, we've had a few messages this week, and the listeners have gone up as well, which is really good. But first of all, I'll give a shout out. Matt, he's working Timber Creek as a copper out there, and he said loves the potty. He did mention that it gets a little bit hard. I think he must be listening to the earlier episodes because we didn't quite have the audio right with that one. But I'll get in touch and find out because. Yeah, mate. When we started this podcast, we recorded it in mono, which was really hard because I think Damo's mic wasn't picking up as well as mine, and so my voice came across louder, and we couldn't really adjust Damo's. But later on, we kind of got it figured out, and I mean, we haven't had many complaints since. So yeah, so but thanks, mate, for getting in contact. And he said, mate, if we're ever swinging past that way, to drop in and have a beer, and so we might have to try and do that in the future. Haven't been out to
Good
Timber Creek
spot.
for years.
Good spot, Timber Creek. Yeah, I haven't been there for a long time either. Yeah, over
Yeah,
10 years, I'd say. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's they do some really good work out there, and they're basically for anybody listening, they're basically the last stop before you get across on the WA border. When you're going in on the Bunting, no, what highway is it? The
Vic Highway, Victoria.
yeah, Victoria
Yeah.
Highway. So, but thanks, Matt, for getting in contact. That's excellent, mate. I'll message you back straight after once we finish recording this. And mate, we've had this is pretty good. Jessica, I think she's down in Adelaide. She works in child protection, but yeah, she actually got onto our podcast, mate, about a week ago, and she's already up to episode 34. So
You're joking. That's about
mate,
17 hours of our ramblings in a week. She's going to
yeah.
need therapy, the poor bugger.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, mate, she put her sister onto it, and she's up to about episode 20. So that's probably
Bloody
about
hell.
what probably 11 or yeah, 11 hours or 12 hours. So so,
We
but yeah,
appreciate
yeah,
your enthusiasm.
yeah, that's right. And she just asked in the future if we can do something in relation with working with child protection and all that sort of stuff, especially in the NT. Which I mean, I know you would have worked with them a fair bit, but when I worked in the family and domestic violence unit, we part of ours was a peace at home program. So we had two child protection officers in our office working alongside us. So yeah, so I can definitely go into. We worked quite well with them in the NT. There were problems at some times, but most of the time we worked really well together. So yeah, it was it worked out really well. So yeah, I think we can definitely do a podcast on that one in the future, mate.
Yeah, that's. I might have an idea about that. Yeah, yep, absolutely. I'll
So
talk to you offline. I reckon I've got a sneaky plan.
oh
All
dear,
good. Yeah.
what's cooking in your brain, mate?
Well, I know somebody who's worked in both policing and child protection, and she knows us very well. So we might have to have a chat with her. I think.
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yep. That's definitely. Mate, and before we and look, for anybody, apologise if I do miss. There's occasionally I see a message, but I'm still learning how to get through this Meta Business Suite, jumping between messages. And we got one. Actually, we got one on Instagram as well, which was actually from Josh. So Josh has sent in, mate, and this is going to be the topic we're going to talk about today. And he said he'd love to hear an episode dedicated to the role of police negotiators in the Northern Territory, for example, training and incidents. And mate, I'll hand it over to you in a minute, because I mean, like as I've joked in the past, well, it's not joking, but you were a trained negotiator, and I know you went through to quite a few incidents, and you were caught called to quite a few incidents over the Northern Territory and all that sort of thing. But I will mention police generally, as you get through the police, we have to negotiate all the time. Our negotiations will be different from the way Damo explains it because when you get police negotiators in, they're more high risk. Whereas when you're negotiating, they're down the street. And one of my favorite sayings was, I used to sit there and basically you come across an incident and you're thinking, well, they don't really need to be locked up, but one person needs to go this way, one person needs to go the other. And I'd sit there and go, all right, you got two choices. You can either walk away now or you're coming in the cage. And they would sit there and go, oh, but I was going, and I said, this isn't a negotiation. You've got two choices, and if you don't make it very soon, I'm going to make it for you. So I mean that's basically that's police work.
That's a lawful direction. It's not really negotiating.
No, I know, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's giving them a choice. But mate, I think I'll hand over to you because you did the training and you got called to quite a few incidents, and take it away, Damo.
Yeah, yeah, mate. So I was always sort of interested. Well, obviously, everyone's aware of police negotiation, and there's a lot of movies that have sort of made it a little bit glamorous. And as a result, that people have a bit of an assumption that it's some magic bullet that negotiators turn up, and we know some Harry Potter style command that makes everything stop. And the fact of the matter is, negotiations is just really good oral communication. That it's really good interpersonal communication, and it doesn't always work. So I first did my negotiator training in 2014 in Darwin, and as part of the training, it's fairly nationalised. The reason that negotiator training is very similar all around the country, I would almost say identical around the country, is because it works in conjunction with police tactical groups. So all police in the 1970s, all police forces developed police tactical groups. So, for want of a better term, your SWAT teams. They're all called different things, but they all do the same thing. They're quite militaristic in the way they do business. They're trained in military close quarter combat and entry techniques and apprehension techniques that are considered high risk, high level weapons, high level use of force, but also lots of non-lethal weapons as well. So they're a very, very capable unit. And because they are a national asset, they can be pulled out of one spot and taken to if we have a raging critical incident somewhere, you can unplug a group from the Northern Territory and send them to Melbourne, for example, and they'll be able to slot in relatively well. Our TRG would be able to work with Victorian SOG fairly well. They'd pick up and plug straight in. A good example of that practically was, and I will move on to negotiation in a minute, mate. I know I'm rambling.
Yeah.
A good example of this was the Lint Cafe siege. What a lot of people don't know, it's not public knowledge and it's not a secret, was that the Queensland Police CERT, or the State Emergency Response Team, was actually on the ground in Sydney about to conduct a bit of a handover with New South Wales Tactical Operations Unit. And the reason for that was just given the fact that matter was potentially ongoing for a very long period of time and very resource intensive, they needed to circle out the operators who'd been on the ground for 14 hours or something and rotate other fresh faces in, because obviously it's a very high risk situation and you need fresh legs to sort of get the job done. So yeah, I wasn't aware of that until I was told, and told by people who definitely were there. So it's just interesting. So where police negotiators come in is that we are the same. Whenever a police tactical group rolls out, trained police negotiators roll with them. Just as the police tactical groups were established in every jurisdiction in the country, every jurisdiction also has a police negotiation unit. In some jurisdictions, being the big ones, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, there are permanent staff. There are quite a few permanent staff in those negotiator units. A lot of that's to do with unit development and training development and things like that to their part-time negotiation crews. But also they are operational negotiators. They will roll out to critical incidents and actually conduct those investigations. I was fortunate. So I went through my training in 2014 in Darwin with a group. Basically, it's a week-long course that signs you off to be a secondary, basically. So the way that a police negotiation team is set up, because it is a team sport, you're not an individual who's doing the whole lot. You'll have a primary negotiator, which is the person who is the main contact with your subject, and the subject is just the person you're negotiating with. You'll have a secondary, so that's your person sitting right next to them, listening to the conversation. They might be jotting notes, making suggestions, but in such a way that they don't distract you. So if you've ever tried to talk on a telephone and someone's trying to talk to you, you know that you just can't do it. So there's a bit of a skill in the secondary of just assisting the primary, but not breaking their chain of thought. And then normally in a full team, you'll have the lead, basically the lead negotiator, who is negotiation coordinator. They will be basically in the headquarters with the incident controller, and basically that liaison between the negotiation team and the incident controller and the tactical controller and things like that. And then you'll have a recorder. So there might be someone in the background who's just writing down everything and recording the conversation so that it's all digitally recorded, and also main notes are written down in a log. So you always conduct a log. You've got to remember, a lot of these critical incidents do end in a fairly hefty coronial investigation, and the police negotiations will be pulled apart during that coronial inquest process, and not just for lessons learned, but also criticism, or it might be that the negotiations have caused something to occur that has saved life, or anything like that, So that's basically the practicalities of it. Our training started off with basically a lot of psychology, how human beings communicate. So to get on the course to start with, you sort of got to be selected a little bit. You've got to have a fair bit of experience in actually talking to people in a policing role, I should say. So you don't really get junior police on those courses. You get guys who've at least sort of 3, 4, 5 years in the job,
Yep.
or even more. We do a few exercises through the week. We listen to a lot of examples from around the world where negotiations have gone badly or where they've gone well. There are heaps of examples of negotiations where the negotiator has antagonized the subject to the point where they've murdered people. And we learn all those lessons as we go. And the end of the week culminates in a really, really long terrorist-based incident. And that is designed to fail. Well, it was in our case. There was no possible way that we could have resolved that matter. However, what it does is it makes us use all of our skills in a really long, exhausting exercise, and really puts the screws on us. So basically, everything you use fails, but you've got to keep trying. And yeah, it culminates in basically you can hear through your headphones a whole heap of gunfire, and then you hear tactical operators going clear, 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 subject down, clear. So it's pretty full on. Very, very interesting and a very rewarding course. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So fast forward out of that, and obviously the Northern Territory is a very big place and very remote. And as a result, it's very hard to have negotiators all based in Darwin or all based in Alice Springs. So there are negotiators all up and down the track, and they're everywhere else as well. Because obviously there's only one full-time police negotiator in the Northern Territory, and they're the head of the negotiation unit attached to TRG. So they work out of the cave, and their role is to develop all the negotiation training, run exercises throughout the year. We used to call it Exercise Silver Tongue, which I thought was well named. I was involved in one of them. They always seemed a time that I couldn't get to them. I was on leave or I had some major job on and I couldn't get to the exercise, but I did go on one and it was good. It was good fun. And they put a bit of funding into that. And yeah, they're quite a well-run exercise. So basically, going back to the old silver bullet thing with negotiations, the biggest thing in negotiation is, I would say, active listening. So people think you have to be a really good talker. I would argue, yes, you do need to be a good talker. You need to be able to think quickly, work in a team environment, and communicate with somebody who might be in crisis or might be trying to achieve an outcome that is not going to be achieved in a hostage rescue situation. They may be a terrorist who has no interest in talking to you. They just want to carry out their role, and they might try and use the negotiators to their end. So the big thing is to listen to what they're saying and develop a bit of a profile on who you're actually dealing with. So we ask big, wide questions, and we've mentioned this in police investigations and actually conducting interviews. It's very similar, but it's done in a more relaxed fashion. But basically, it's like, also, obviously, there's a situation here. We're police negotiators. Look, can you tell me what's going on here today? You'll have what we call an opening question. And that can be met with any kind of response you can imagine. But a lot of the times, we were met with ramblings. People will come back, but you'll listen to them say why they're there, let them talk, give them silence. When they stop and there is a natural pause, we use a tactic called mirroring. So we go, okay, so you've mentioned a few things there. You said this, and this. So you did mention this, like you said, and I even state their words back to them, this. Just tell me more about that. So very much similar to interviewing, because what you're trying to do is get that information and flesh out the information and develop the motivations, um, the reason why this person is in the situation they're in. So, police negotiators, we get called to all different sorts of jobs. We can handle suicidal people, people in mental health crisis, which was a really common one. So that were the two big ones that you went to quite a bit, was just a suicidal person or someone in a mental health crisis. And then your higher end stuff is your Ben Hoffman's. Not that we did negotiate with him, but the idea was if he was to lodge himself in what we call a stronghold. So if he was to get to a situation where he's barricaded in a building with or without hostages, the whole idea of policing is to minimise force and protect life and property. So we would negotiate with him and try and bring about a peaceful resolution to the issue. So that was why we were there straight away. As a result, as it turned out, he just gave up in the end after his rampage. So there was no police negotiation with him.
Yep.
And then right through to obviously terrorist incidents. I've never been involved in a terrorist incident, but I've done a training course in Parramatta where I got to speak with and complete the course with people who were involved in the Link Cafe siege, which was
Yep.
really interesting to hear what they said. So back to that old magic bullet. The magic bullet, I believe, is building a rapport through active listening and that mirroring. So repeating back to these people what they've said, establish what their motives are. We call them hooks and triggers. So a hook is something that is motivating those people. I'll give an example. Um, we negotiated with a mentally ill man who was a bit of a sad story. He was a former New Zealand prison guard who'd been seriously assaulted in a prison in New Zealand, and as a result had an acquired brain injury that had degraded into a mental health problem. He was subject of a mental health order to return to hospital involuntary. And when the mental health services went to his flat to tell him this, he basically slammed the door in their face, threatened violence, threatened self harm, and refused to come out. So, due to the fact he was a very big boy with a level of training and high level of motivation, he was armed with knives inside the building. We had a TRG rolled out. We were there, and the negotiations were back and forth a bit. We had some times where he would talk to us, other times he would just ignore us. A lot of a lot of police negotiating is yelling through a bullhorn at a building. This is the police. Can you please make contact with us, or please step out? We want you to do this. It's all this sort of thing. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, a lot of the time it can be frustrating, but that's where the patience comes in and that active listening. With this particular fella, he wasn't interested in going back in. He had a real issue with his medication that he was on. So that's what we found as a hook. We mentioned that his wife was in contact with us as well, and she was saying, um, "Don't talk about this. He's really sensitive about this." I can't remember what that was, but that's what we call a trigger. So a hook is something that he's interested in. So we worked out through our active listening when he was talking to us that his medication was what we call a hook. That was something that he really was interested in. So we would expand on that and go, look, we're not doctors, as you know, but if you've got this major issue with your medication, we can emphasize that you were saying this during this critical incident here. And as a result, your doctor will listen, and you might be able to talk about getting a different style of medication or trying some different type of treatment. Well, he was interested in that. He talked to us about that. At one point, we mentioned that his wife, before we actually knew his wife was a major trigger, we mentioned it and he lost the plot. Absolutely yelled and screamed, and don't mention that woman to me. And he was going off. They had a good relationship, but his mental health condition made him quite sensitive about her. And as a result, that was a trigger. So we would note that down for when we hand over to, so if we do, 10, 12 hours, which we did with this guy, we have to hand
Yep.
over to a new negotiation team. So we'd note down that sort of, that trigger and hand that information over to the oncoming. The hooks, we identified a few hooks with him. He was interested in talking about prisons and police. He was interested in the tactical guys. He wanted to know what they were going to do to him. And we were saying, well, nothing. It's obviously because you've got weapons and you're a big fella. And he kind of liked the fact that he was capable himself, not in an aggressive way, but just in a way that we were acknowledging the fact that this was a fella who had talent and had skill. Everybody's favourite subject is themselves, like I've said before. So for us to sort of go, we know that you're an intelligent bloke, mate. You know how these things work. We're just worried that, obviously there's a potential for harm here. These guys are just here to make sure nobody gets hurt, all that sort of thing. And then he was interested in talking about tactics. And obviously we're not going to talk to him about the tactics we would potentially use, but tactics in general.
Yep.
And that was another pretty good hook that would allow us to just have a conversation. These conversations may seem pointless, but they build a lot of rapport. And as a result, that he sort of got to a point where he was enjoying our company a little bit. Just given the erratic nature of his mental health condition, he at one point he gassed us. It's a prison term for urine and feces he put urine and feces in an ice cream container and stirred it into basically a liquid. And he was talking nicely to us, and my partner and I. So I was the primary, and my secondary was a fella next to me, and I was standing next to the shield man, the fella at the front in the TRG stack. And we stepped forward a little bit just to hear what he had to say. And he said, "Get some of this, you bastards," and threw this bucket of urine and feces, and it flew up in the air. And I remember looking up going, "No!" Closed my eyes, closed my mouth, put my head down, and we got showered in droplets of this rubbish. Anyway, what the
Oh,
funny reaction there was the shield man at the front of the stack sort of stepped across in front of us, didn't react at all except for just to tilt his shield back on about a 40-degree angle, and then just tilt it back vertical again. And there was urine and feces all over the front of his shield, but none on him. But there was
yep.
plenty on us. So we had a little sabbatical, went back and changed our shirt. I think the funny thing there was our good mate Dave O'Reed, and he was on scene there at that stage, and he went back to the watch house where we often keep spare clothes at the watch house. He came back with two undersized shirts for us to swap into. We went back. There was a laundry on that floor of this apartment building, and we just washed our heads, washed it off our skin as best we could. And then I was wearing an undersized Hawaiian t-shirt for the rest of the negotiation, and it caused a bit of an eyebrow raise when the watch commander came up to the front just to see how we were travelling. So, what the hell are you blokes wearing? We told the story, but anyway, that resolved through what we call a surrender plan. So quite often we'll talk once we can realise that somebody has turned and they are interested in giving up, but that you've got to really save someone's face. You let them surrender in a way that maintains their dignity. So this guy was a very proud fella. He knew he had problems. He knew he had to go back to hospital. He really hated the medication. He had lost some of his function and his rationality, which is part of the mental health illness. But eventually we built enough rapport with him that we were able to negotiate a surrender plan with him. And we went through that surrender plan. It almost sounds ridiculous, but we do what we call rehearsals. So I actually carried out the next morning a couple of rehearsals with him to surrender. So I give him the surrender plan, deliver that plan, which is basically what we want you to do is take off your shirt, be in shorts. You're going to walk out backwards out through the door, keep your arms to the side. You're going to turn 360 degrees. And the reason that's done is so that the TRG guys at the front and the quite often there are marksmen around as well, just to provide cover and observations. They can make sure that there's no weapons on the person. You normally get them to lie down on their back and keep their arms where they are. And then you make sure there's no surprises. Tell them that 4 men dressed in camouflage and wearing balaclavas and holding rifles are going to come towards you. They're not going to hurt you. They're just going to put your hands behind your back and handcuff you, and then they're going to stand you up and search you. That's what's going to happen. And they're like, yep, okay, no worries. So we'll get you to do all that, but no one's going to come anywhere near you. And it builds trust. So you let them lie down. Okay, that's good, mate. Thank you for that. Can you stand up now and go back inside? I want you to relax, have a drink of water, and we'll rehearse again. Or if you're ready to come out, we can do that now. So that's the rehearsing of that surrender plan. Obviously, no two jobs are ever the same, and that's why you build your intelligence picture as you go by documenting those hooks, triggers, really getting to know your subject through that active listening and that mirroring, so that real rapport building with them. It gets to the point, I've been involved with lots of little negotiations where the fellas come out at the end, and quite often a minor suicidal one without necessarily having tactical operators there. where they've come over to an ambulance to go to a mental health assessment voluntarily, and they want to shake your hand because they said, "Oh, thanks for being nice to me," things like that's the really lower end.
Yep.
Um, I think one of the most rewarding ones I had was a pretty full-on situation, and it doesn't sound full-on at the beginning, but we had a mother called us one day that her 9-year-old son was threatening suicide in a house in Alice Springs. We had turned up, and the house had been absolutely turned upside down, and I could see. I entered the house in through the lounge room, and I could see the mother standing in the kitchen, absolutely terrified and shaking, and pleading with someone who was around the corner. I couldn't see them. Anyway, we had some information that her son, and we'd heard 9 years old, and we thought, nine, what? Anyway, that this kid was nearly as tall as me. He was 9 years old, but he was very big. He was a very big child, and he had a very large kitchen knife directly to his chest, and he was threatening his mother as well. So I moved in quietly, and I just pulled Mum out by the. I just took. I reached out, so Mum. I didn't pull her out. I just took her by the hand and led her out of the kitchen, and just put my head around the corner and had a look at what I was seeing. And um, there was a 9-year-old boy standing there with this massive knife to his chest, and a look in his eyes like, "I'm going to do this." He was very committed to what he was doing. And anyway, I started talking to him, said, "What's brought this on?" He goes, "I'm just going to kill myself. I'm going to kill myself right now. That'll teach Mum." And he was really full on. Like the kid's obviously got a lot of demons for a
Yep.
very young fella. And I just thought we're dealing with an immature mind here with a very strong body, armed with a very dangerous weapon. And I had to be, and I wasn't there as a negotiator. Really, I happened to be a negotiator, but I was there as a general duty support. This was in the days after the the Zach Rolfe shooting.
Yep.
Excuse me. And we'd gone down just to help out, so we were just extra vans on the road, and I happened to just go to this job one day. And I tried, I just said, "Okay, so tell me what's going on." I just kept him talking. "I just want to die. I just want to die." Okay. So I thought, right, I've just got to make this practical. I said, "Righto, so how are you going to do it?" As "I'm going to shove this knife straight through my chest into my heart and I'll just die." I said, "You're not going to be able to do that. Your chest's really hard. It's really strong. It's going to hurt so much. It's just not a good option." And anyway, I just kept it practical. That may sound a bit reckless, but I mean, I was right there. I did have a taser, but I'm acutely aware of tasering a 9-year-old. But anyway, I did have that behind my back, and he couldn't see any of that. He was just, had my head around a wall just to provide a bit of cover from him if he did decide to start stabbing, because even a 9-year-old could inflict a lethal injury with a knife. I know that a lot of people who aren't in the game would think, "Well, hang on, it's a 9-year-old kid. You just grab the knife off him." Yeah, it's a 9-year-old kid in mental health crisis, highly motivated, and he's a big boy. And all you got to do is slip your hand, and that knife goes straight into your carotid artery or any major artery, which is not far under the skin, and you're dead. So you do have to
Yep.
be careful. Um, anyway, so I had all that tactical response in my head a little bit, but I was thinking more just pull backwards and get out of the way. Anyway, I negotiated around him, and I found that a hook for him was pain. He didn't want to hurt. So he was asking me, "Well, where can I stab myself that I'm not going to feel it?" And I said, "Nowhere, mate. You're going to feel it. It's going to hurt. It's going to be the worst pain you've ever felt in your life." He said, "You're going to panic. You're going to all this sort of thing." And I just explained it like that. Eventually, I needed to build trust with him. And I remember saying to him, "Can you put the knife down for a minute? And I'm not going to come." He said, "No, you're going to run and tackle me." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not, mate. I'm going to stand right here. I'm just going to talk to you. I just want you to put the knife down and just show me that you can trust me." Anyway, he put the knife on the kitchen bench about 10 centimeters from his hand. So it was out of his hand, but he was still armed, for want of a better term. He still had access to that weapon. So I stayed where I was and just built that rapport. And I said, "See, I told you I'm not going to rush you. Mate, we can take as long as we want. It's me and you. We're in charge here, no one else." And he built that rapport, and he sort of trusted that I wasn't there to hurt him. I was there to help him. Anyway, we spoke to him for about 25 minutes or so. And in the end, I said, "Mate, why don't you come out and have a drink of water? We'll just sit down and have a chat." And he walked over and he actually gave me a bit of a hug. And I put my taser away quickly and just walked him out. He'd left the knife in the kitchen. He was still escalating a little bit. His trigger was his mother. He didn't want to see his mum. So we just said, "Look, I know." And Mum was distraught. So we had to just get her away. But she wanted to be there. I said, "Look, we just need to de-escalate it." And in the end, ambulance was standing by. He didn't want to go with them. Unfortunately, we did have to force him down on the on a stretcher, and he was sedated by the paramedics. Just given his height and state, he was quite erratic at that point. He wasn't armed anymore. We weren't worried about that, but he was still very erratic, and we didn't want him to grab a rock or something out of the garden bed. So we we restrained him there. And I remember at the end, you get fatherly. We were tactical, but you have to be fatherly. At that point, I had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I could relate to, this is a kid. Like, he's a kid in mental health distress and a lot of demons, but he's still a kid. So I remember just, good on you, mate. Calm down, buddy. You'll be okay. So you get a bit fatherly when he's had his injection. He's calmed down a bit. So that was pretty rewarding. I mean, Mum was pretty happy that we'd got him there. I don't know the outcome. His outcome there. We basically, he went sedated in the ambulance, and that was the end of our involvement. I think I've mentioned. Oh, there's that flooding in. There's that many of them.
No,
Another rewarding one, and I actually didn't resolve it. It was the Alice Springs prison. There was a very well-known murderer in Alice Springs prison who basically climbed onto the roof of the jail and incited not a violent riot, but a bit of a rebellion against the staff there. They just
I,
isolated them.
I know this one. You've told me
Yeah.
this one.
So anyway, he was. This was actually very creative. The way we resolved this in the end was actually quite creative. So, um, human humans can start off at the beginning of a situation quite motivated and quite angry, but time wears down everything. Water over time will wear down a rock. So
Yeah.
time is your biggest friend in negotiations. We can talk all day, we can talk all night, we can talk for a week, talk for a month. A human being's going to need to rest, eat, sleep, go to the toilet. So these guys are on the roof of the Alice Springs prison. Very quickly, a large number of the other prisoners gave up, but this one particular fella, he was very motivated, very intelligent guy, highly manipulative, very evil guy. He stayed on the roof for a lot longer, and he'd been on the roof at this stage for about 24 hours because we rotated in as the second rotation. The first rotation had been negotiating for about 16 hours. We came in, did the handover, hooks and triggers. The big thing there was there were very little hooks. The hooks were all about him, and his triggers were anything apart from what he wants to talk about. So very, very manipulative, psychopathic sort of bloke. So anyway, but psychopaths have to eat. So he hasn't eaten for 24 hours by this stage. He had minimal water. It was the middle of winter, so it wasn't overly hot, but he had no water up there. And the prison guards are getting worried. We need to give him water. I said, absolutely, we'll give him water. When he climbs down that ladder and surrenders, we'll give him all the water he wants. So we thought, what we're going to do here is we're going to do this with a blunt weapon, being his needs. His physical needs are going to get him off this roof because we're not giving him anything. This is where the negotiation comes into it. Negotiation implies that we give you something, you give us something. So no worries, we'll give you all the water you want, but you're coming down here. You want a cigarette? Yep, no worries. It's right here. Come and get it. So you're hungry. Excellent. Come down and eat. So what we did was they were cooking, and because they'd locked everyone down, they were going to cook a barbecue in the main. There's a pretty big main recreational area in the middle of this particular cell block. The whole prison's locked down. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're standing outside, and they said, "Oh, we're going to cook in the kitchen." And I think one of the others said, as a joke, "We should cook out here, down or upwind, or downwind, sorry, so that the smell of the onions and the sausages wafts up on the roof." And we all looked at each other and went, "That's exactly what we're going to do." So anyway, they wheeled this barbecue out into the big open yard outside the cell block, and started cooking sausages and onion. And everyone knows that magnificent smell outside Bunnings on a Saturday morning. So imagine standing on top of the Alice Springs prison, having not eaten in 24 hours, been awake the whole time, and all you can smell now is sausages and onion. So anyway, he's down there, right, you need to send me up some of that food. We're like, no, mate, no. These guys are all going to have something to eat in the cells. We're going to go around. The prison guards are going to feed everyone. They're all having a barbecue. But you're getting nothing until you come off the roof. So it got down to the point where basically he was trying to operate at a high level, manipulation of the government and all this sort of thing. And we're like, mate, you're in a jail. You're on the roof. You're in no position for us to do anything. You've got no hostages. You've got nothing to offer us. So we're happy to stand around here on overtime while you bark orders and try and manipulate us all you like. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we're going nowhere. You're going to come down off that roof one day and go back into your cell. Simple as that.
Yep.
And that was pretty well the negotiation. In the end, he had a conversation with one of our other sergeants who wasn't in the negotiation team, and he had a quick chat to him, and then he's walked over. We did the whole surrender plan, so show us you've got nothing in your pockets, all that sort of stuff. But he's a secure prisoner inside a jail, so fairly minimal risk, but he has been on the roof. Anyway, he climbs down the ladder. He's very gently taken into custody because you've got to maintain that rapport.
Yep.
Somewhere like the Northern Territory, we have repeat repeat visitors. I've negotiated with one particular fella in Darwin on three different occasions. So you've got to maintain that trust beyond the individual incident. Anyway, this bloke comes down and he said, "You said I could have something to eat." Absolutely, we did, and you definitely can. You're going back to your cell, and here's as many sausages and onions on bread and all the tomato sauce you can want. But you're going back into your cell, and that was how we resolved it. So the magic bullet there was no words because he wasn't interested in words. He wanted to be the one dictating terms, but we used his own needs against him basically to get to resolve the situation.
Yep.
So I think
Yeah.
the big takeaways from police, that's just a couple of examples. And I know, look, I've skimmed over it. I mean, it's a week long course just to become a beginner. Um, you normally come in to the negotiator unit as a qualified seconder, so you can help the primary. You'll develop your skills on smaller jobs, and you'll promote to a primary, and then you can promote to being a team leader. And then there is the position of the police negotiator, police negotiation uh, coordinator, I think it's called,
Oh, right. Yeah.
and that's the one full time role. So they're sort of the levels within the negotiation unit. So obviously, we've spoken about this for 30 odd minutes, but there's a hell of a lot more to it. There's a lot of psychology involved, but there's a lot of common sense. Um, I think anyone who's a good bloke who can just have a yarn to people, our good mate, the late, great Brett Meredith, he qualified as a police negotiator in 2008, and he was considered one of the best negotiators that went through because he was just such a nice fella. He was a relatable bloke. He could speak to the common man. He wasn't condescending. He had a sense of calm about him all the time, and that's
Yep.
I tried to emulate the way he used to talk to people. So um, that's the biggest one. I think a lot of people think it's all about dynamic verbal commands, and not really. Quite often, you'll see a big flash situation set up, and then you'll hear a police negotiator go, "G'day, mate, how you going? Everything right? What's going on today?" And a bit of swearing, bit of just the common touch sort of thing,
Yep.
and that's the skill of police negotiation. Um, Taking that common language that people feel at ease about and still being able to convey surrender plans, the reason why you have to come into custody, quote legislation off the cuff. There's lots
Yeah.
of little things that you develop over time that make you a good police negotiator. I like to think I wasn't too bad at it. I certainly wasn't the best at it. I saw some brilliant negotiators while I was there. I saw some bad ones. People who came out with a robotic voice barking orders. It just doesn't work. You've got to. The biggest thing is build a rapport. So, um,
Well,
yeah,
mate,
I
like
think,
I've always said, you can actually take candy off a baby without it crying. So, um,
and I think, like I said, mate, they always cry, but I get the candy. Yeah. So I think,
um,
yeah, that was a bit of an introduction to it, mate. It's a very interesting thing. I loved it. I really enjoyed police negotiating. It was very rewarding in the fact that it was you are receiving information from a subject. You are basically processing that information to work out a strategy to use that information back to the subject in order for them to basically resolve the situation. So um, I really enjoyed it. I'll just touch on some other things with the tactical negotiation. Actually, no, I won't do that. Yeah, some of the tactical negotiation stuff with counter terror is information that just doesn't need to be in the public domain. But there is some really
yeah,
interesting tactical stuff that we use. Police negotiations, almost counterintuitive for negotiating, but I won't put it out in the public. Some of that's still fairly protected information, but and that's not a wanky throwaway thing. I was just
it's
thinking of an example, but it's not really something I'm happy to talk about. So, a lot of the
yeah,
domestic negotiation, just talking to crooks or people in mental health, that's not a secret. That's You can Google online how to do that. Um,
yeah,
what you won't be able to Google is the experience and the ability and just the time in the job to build up those skills in the real world. So, but yeah, when it comes to that counter terror stuff, there's a few things in there that we keep to ourselves. So,
yeah, yeah, mate. I'm just going to touch on a few things. Like so, early I've been so. I know I've mentioned this before, but you know you said that when you've got a negotiator, you have got a secondary, or what I would call from the interviewing term as a cooperator. And because when you're leading things like interviews, and I imagine it's the same when you're negotiating, you miss stuff because you're guiding the conversation. There's intricate stuff that you will miss, and that's what a corroborating member is for. So when you're doing interviews, if you're leading the interview, you're so involved in leading it, and going it the way you want, there you will miss subtle differences or subtle things that people might say. And that's what the corroborator's there to follow up. So, like this whole time you've been talking about, I've been making notes about different stuff, and that was one of them that I said, to have a chat about. The other thing, mate, I'm going to ask you, how many negotiators are in the NT, like as in trained? Do you know?
Oh, mate, it varies. Obviously, people come and go. People leave the job. People become um, inactive, so they basically stop going to negotiator jobs. Um, I don't know. I know there's probably there'd be 10 or 15 at best in Darwin. Normally 3 or 4 in Catherine, maybe 6 or 7 in Alice. I think there was 2 of us in Tennant. Um,
Yep.
yeah, there was it varied a lot.
I
They
suppose
try and run courses every year. They'll run a new course every year. And the other thing, a lot of people will do a course and then find themselves so busy they don't have time to be on call as a negotiator or be called out to major incidents. So some of those people over years will become inactive. You
Yeah.
lose your qualification. I think they were talking about a policy where you actually lose your qualification because, like anything, if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you haven't done an exercise or been to an incident in a 12-month period, I think they get onto you and basically say you need to justify why you should stay a police negotiator or why you
Yep.
should keep that qualification. Listen, I can't remember the exact policy around that. I just know that there are a lot of people on the books who were completely inactive and hadn't been to a job for many years for a variety of reasons. Some of them were non-operational. Some had been promoted. You had bosses; they were higher ranking now. As a result, they're not operational anymore, so they can't really be a police negotiator.
Yep.
You sort of senior sergeant and below was where your negotiators were drawn from.
Yep.
And yeah, generally speaking, you don't want very junior constables either because you need to have that little bit of experience and time in the job and understanding of how all that sort of thing works.
Yeah, that's right, mate. There's also another thing, like, and we've mentioned this before about saving face. So when you're actually working with some people, like I know we've spoken about that, fight that was going on in Ryan Park where Dingle and I attended, and just so we told the guy that he was too drunk to fight, and so you just sit there and mate, come along. You can turn it on a little bit with us, but you can come back and fight him tomorrow, because he would have forgotten about it tomorrow. But that's just way that he can actually save his honour, and
Yeah.
especially when dealing with some of the Aboriginal, especially the Warlpies. That's a big thing to them. So you can actually de-escalate the situation by doing something like that and allowing to save face. So I thought that was an important thing to touch on, especially for people wanting to join the police. So there's it's always important for whoever you're trying to take in to get them so they can save a bit of face. And so I suppose you try and give them a little bit of not authority. How would you put
No,
it,
you
Damo?
just build up their dignity. So obviously
Yeah,
there are times when in tactical situations where you can't do that. You just have to apprehend them and stop the situation. Their
yep,
behaviour will make it impossible for you to make them save face.
yep,
But in situations where there is no need to escalate a situation, and this is not just relevant to police negotiation. This is relevant to any kind of policing or customer service. Just de-escalation. It's treat a person how you'd like to be treated, and remember that if you treat someone like a human being, 8 times out of 10 you'll get a human being. If you treat them like an animal, 10 times out of 10 you'll get an animal.
yep.
So
That's exactly right.
it's yeah, allowing a human being to save face. And the other thing is just be practical. A lot of the times, someone like we had an example. Another negotiation I was involved in was a fella who wanted suicide by cop, and I think I've mentioned this job before, where he was pointing a crossbow at a police car that was empty. He didn't know it was empty, but he thought if I point this over there, they're going to shoot me. He was about 30 meters away. Um, we He said, well, it doesn't matter now. I've already committed offences. I'm going to jail for ages anyway. What's it matter? I may as well die. And just the practicalities of that, we pointed out to him, no, mate, actually, you haven't committed that many serious offences.
Yep,
I think you're actually, you're in a bit of mental health crisis because you've said to us that you want to kill yourself. That's actually a big one too. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It really brings that hope. And it's like, yeah, I want you to do it. So
yep.
straight away, we're like, yeah, right. So talk through the practicalities of that. But it was also that we gave him a way out. We said, mate, you're not in that much trouble. See, I think you're going through a mental health problem at the moment. You haven't harmed anybody. You've created a resource response where we've got a lot of police here, but that's what we're paid to do. Um, you've got a weapon out in public. All right, well, that's not a major offence. You're not going to go to jail for that. You haven't hurt anybody with that weapon, and you haven't threatened to kill anybody or hurt anybody. So, mate, you're not in that much trouble. If you do threaten someone or hurt, that will make things worse. But you haven't done that at the moment. So, just explaining to them that, mate, you're not in very much trouble, but your behaviour from now on can escalate this. You may get in more trouble. Um,
Yep.
and then you sort of got to skirt around. He wanted to die, so he was going, if I point this crossbow straight at a cop, you have to shoot me, don't you? It's like, no, we don't. Only if there's a major threat. But we try and move away from that. And what I did, I always flick back to the real practical human parts. So, mate, we're a fair way away from you. They're probably going to shoot you, but they're probably not going to kill you. They're probably going to wound you. You're probably going to end up with a colostomy bag. You might end up in a bloody wheelchair. It's going to be the worst, most horrible pain you've ever felt in your life. It's not what you want to do. You're going to instantly regret anything like that. So that may sound weird, but you just point out the practicalities of getting shot and the fact that police
Yep.
reacting aren't necessarily going to be a sniper taking aim. It's going to be police drop the weapon, bang, bang, bang. It's going to be a wild show.
Yeah.
He wasn't to know that I had tactical response officers sitting, lying in a garden bed 15 meters away. He probably would have killed him, but it's that wasn't the point. It was the negotiation. It was the pointing out the practicalities and allowing him to make a decision in his own mind. And he was
Yep.
another one who came out unarmed, handcuffed. They uncuffed him, putting him into the back of the ambulance because he was completely compliant by that stage. He's escorted by police, and he shook my hand. He's, oh mate, thank you for being nice to me and all that sort of thing. So
Yep.
there was that. So treating
Yeah.
people as humans, yeah. There's no I think the recap. There's no magic bullet. There's a lot of active listening. You got to build rapport. There's techniques to doing that. Showing, identifying what's important to people and what aggravates them, and having an objective. So, what is the objective here? The objective is the safe resolution, taking this person into custody without any harm to any person. Yep, no worries. That's your objective.
Yep.
So,
Mate,
yeah,
I'll
it's
just
sorry,
I'll
mate. You
just
go.
touch on two other things. So the other thing, and it kind of segues nicely in the fact that you said, when you're talking about that 9 year old and you're talking about the pain and like you said, it sounds harsh and it does sound harsh, but sometimes you've actually got to. Some of the best ways to actually get people to understand what the position they're in is actually dealing with the facts. And this is, and it will actually make them think about it and for people that don't really want to go through it, it's a way. It's always. I mean, it's always a bit of a gamble, I suppose. But you read the people and you make the call at the time. Because there's a couple of times I've said you don't really want to go down this path, and these are the reasons why. And look, 9 times out of 10, people that have been in a job a long time know how to read people fairly well, and they can judge on how they approach it. But there is no there is, like you said, mate, there's no silver bullet in how you actually go about it. But for anybody that thinks what Damo did was quite harsh, it's actually quite logical when you've
Mm.
been involved in a lot of incidents all the time and all that sort of stuff. Like even what you said about the bullets, this is a potential that could happen. So it's one of the things. The other thing I'm going to touch on just quickly, mate, clear directions. People, I've always said, and many people have asked me, I've never had a problem with somebody in the cells if they knew exactly what the outcome was going to be.
Mm.
Um, it was easy when I was out in Ramangini, and a lot of the times I knew my people quite well, and I knew the regular offenders and all that sort of thing. And a lot of times it didn't matter whether they were getting remanded or whether they were getting bail when you arrested them. But a lot of the time I was able to tell them what was going to happen when I arrested them. And once they knew, it didn't matter if they were getting remanded, they would be happy because they would know what was going on and they knew what the future was going to hold. The problem you have with anybody is when they don't know what's going to happen. And if something unexpected comes along, then they will complain. And I think maybe some politicians should take note of
Yeah,
that. But yeah, mate, that's basically all I wanted to touch on. It was just some of the points that I noted down as you
mate.
were talking through.
Yeah, what you've said there is extremely important. You got to remember, a lot of these places. This is not a major centre where no one's ever dealt with this person before. These are small regional centres and remote communities where you know who these people are, and you know that you're going to have to probably negotiate to some capacity. It mightn't be a formal police negotiation rollout. It might just be the local coppers having a quick yarn in order to de-escalate a situation so that force isn't required. That's still a negotiation.
Yep.
Um, what um, what you've got to be, and you've said it there beautifully, you must be honest, and the honesty is appreciated even if they don't like the outcome. I'll give an example as well. We've done really low level de-escalations and negotiations where we've said, if you just walk over here and be good and sit down, we'll just let you hop in the back of the cage with no one's going to hurt you, and you get to have a cigarette. Yeah, righto.
Yep.
If you then throw that person in the cage and shut the door and don't give them a cigarette, they will never trust anyone else ever again, and that de-escalation won't work. If you de-escalate, keep your tactical wits about you, but let them have a cigarette at the back of the cage, maintain prisoner security, all that sort of thing. They will appreciate that, and they will trust you in the future. It may even become a point where he may barricade himself. There's a lot of people who do crazy things in these places, and police are de-escalating them all the time and apprehending them constantly. It may be that he knows that if the coppers say you can have a smoke, you can have a smoke. And it might be that, you know what, I just want to smoke before I go to jail. Righto, here's your smoke.
Yep.
Right, get in the back. Good on you, mate. Let's roll. Another little flip side of negotiations are sometimes we are being used as the tactical communication. So it may be you will do this, you're coming out here, and it's just that we can put the words together through whatever means we're using, be a mobile phone or a loud hailer or whatever else. I've been in situations where we've had armed offenders coming out of a building, disarming, and then being apprehended in what we would call a surrender plan, but they're not necessarily loving the idea. And we'd be in the Bearcat, which is a big armoured vehicle, sitting there talking over a loud hailer, and we're basically just the voice for the tactical operators. So that's not so much police negotiation. That's just dynamic verbal commands and turn around, hands out to the side, lift your shirt up, show me that you've got no weapons, prove to us you've got no weapons, lie on the ground, face away from me, hands out to the side like an aeroplane, all this sort of stuff.
Yep.
You will be approached by tactical operators. Do not move. Do not move. And they will talk to you in a minute. And then you hear the boys don't move, and you hear the tactical guys come in. So we did that a few times as well. So it's not really negotiating. It's more just the mouthpiece for the TRG.
Yep.
And yeah, everything in between, mate. We done really low end stuff. De-escalation. It starts at that lowest end. It can start at a very angry person getting a ticket. Look, I understand that you're upset. I can see that this is making you angry. The fact of the matter is, it's nothing personal. You've been detected at this speed. You've got the ability to contest the ticket if you don't like. If you're not happy with my conduct, you can make a complaint. And
Yep.
look, I'm sorry you feel that way, but anyway, I'm sorry the day's interaction, but off you go. And you're not apologising. It's just you're just using your own body language and your own communication skills to de-escalate a situation. You can let someone have in their own mind a moral victory. You've still achieved your objective. They've at this
Yep.
lowest end, you've still written out a traffic infringement and the driver drives off. They might go and tell every mate they have that I told this cop and I get fucked and blah blah blah, and he just buggered off, and well, no, you got a ticket, mate. The cop won.
Yeah.
So you get the last word, we get the last action. So you got to swallow your ego a bit there. There's no reason to escalate a situation, or almost ever.
Yep.
There are some times where it's used very tactically in specialist police. You might aggravate to get a response in order to stop them doing something else, but that's a
Yep.
very specialised thing, and that's pretty rare.
Yeah. Yeah, mate. I think we're probably just about at it. Well, we're definitely at our time limit.
Yeah.
And I know, mate. I've actually you've just made a whole lot more stories. It's amazing how much you actually remember when you're talking about this sort of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But mate, before I go, I must give a shout out to Kylie Northey as well. She got in contact with us, I think, on one of our on our posts. So she's a friend of ours from the Northern Territory. So
Yeah,
I'll
husband Rob was in the job. I think is he still in the job, Rob?
no, I don't think so, mate. No.
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 Yeah.
So, well, not really sure actually.
Mm.
I should try and find out, but yeah. So, just a shout out to her. Yeah, mate. I think we probably finish that up.
Yeah, happy with that. Yeah, let us know what you think. If you've got any comments or further questions about police negotiations, as you can tell, we can both talk under wet cement. So
Well,
yeah,
Yes, yeah. You give us, mate. You give us a what do you call it? A trigger demo, and it just yeah, it
No, it's
just
a
goes
hook.
off. On
A trigger is
yeah,
something that
oh, sorry.
sends you
Yeah,
off. You're not happy about it, but a hook's something you're interested in. So, police negotiating for me was a bit of a hook. I quite liked it. But
yep,
yeah, it's a good little term. That hooks and triggers. I like that saying. I didn't coin any of this stuff. I just like it. So, hooks and
yep.
triggers. Yeah,
So, but yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and yeah, mate, and we will we're doing some interviews with some more people. We're just lining them up and getting a time frame. Just when it's sometimes it's hard to lock people down,
yeah.
especially if they are police officers because they're very busy at the moment. So,
And I might
but
even throw it out
yeah,
there. If
mate,
we've got
we'll
anyone listening, and especially experienced coppers, if you've got any stories you'd like to tell on here, we're happy to get you on and talk to you. So yeah, get
yep,
in touch. Send us through on it. Send us through. You might be from any jurisdiction anywhere. You might be an ex-copper, whatever it is. Might be a paramedic, military. Who knows? We're interested to hear.
yep,
I think we can all sort of show how it's similar everywhere if we get
yep,
together and have a chat. So
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, yeah, mate, I think we'll finish that up, and yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and yeah, we'll see you all next time.
happy days.